I sold all my crypto during the May 2021 crash, not because of panic, but paying for my son's chemotherapy is the best decision I've ever made, even though he's gone now.
Wow.
And like that just really, I don't know, it just really hit me. And I was like, wow. And I feel like part of the reason I love that so much is certainly in the crypto space, it's very easy to lose track of the utility of the money in the real world.
Hello and welcome to DeFire, the crypto storytelling podcast where we explore the human side of the crypto world. My name is Jonas, and today on the show you will get to listen to the silky voice of a British man that goes by the name of Alpha, or Alpha Illustrated. Alpha is the mastermind behind Coinfessions, a website where you can anonymously post crypto-related confessions. With over 150,000 followers on his Twitter account, Alpha provides an outlet for people who want to get their secrets off their chest and share it with the world. You'll get to hear some of his favorite confessions throughout the episode, so make sure to stick around. Join us as we explore Alpha's journey and learn how a logo competition kickstarted his Twitter account, his thoughts on different traders on crypto Twitter, and more. Buckle up for a fascinating conversation that delves into what it means to make it and whether there will be cake. But before we start, a quick word from our sponsor. CryptoValley.jobs is a job board where engineers, designers, analysts, traders, and community builders can find cool crypto jobs. Full disclosure, I run this job board. So if you're looking for a job or you want to advertise an open position, please go and visit CryptoValley.jobs. And while you're there, make sure to sign up on the email lists so you're always informed when new jobs are posted on the platform. That's CryptoValley.jobs, and now let's start the show. We're live. Well, thank you so much to come on the show. Alpha, one thing that I always need is like, give us a short introduction, state your name, who you are, what you do, etc.
For sure. Well, firstly, thanks for having me on the show. I get approached to do a lot of these sort of things, especially through the Coinfessions inquiries form, and yours really stood out. So I thought, this is a guy that I can sort of trust and have a good conversation with. And at the same time, a lot of my success has been born from other people being generous with their time. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about my various projects, but it felt only right that I should sort of pay it back. So, I'm Alpha, or Alpha Illustrated, and I started life as a designer, specifically in the crypto space, with the premise of illustrating illustrating good trading advice, trading best practice concepts, trying to turn them into memorable, minimal designs. And following that, I expanded out and have started a number of other projects, including Coinfessions and a weekly newsletter with a few other traders from crypto Twitter that interviews successful traders from the space, as well as provide analysis on the markets and the NFT space.
And how I found you was through Coinfessions, and I don't know how it grew, and I would be interested in knowing how that whole thing started. But for me, suddenly it was here, and then it popped up all the time, and they have like this signature style with the yellow and black. And I've seen that all of the people that I follow also follow you. And somehow it really captured something special where people can express themselves in the bear market. People have been hit hard by the downturn. A lot of people have lost a lot of money. So it's very interesting to hear some of the confessions.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a quick introduction to how Coinfessions came around, if you like. And actually, all three of the projects are related. And it first started with the illustration side of things. And I started off crawling Twitter, following traders that I respected, and taking some of their tweets, some of the advice that they've given in tweets, and turning them into illustrations. And after a while, I began to run out of steam, sort of running out of content. So I decided to start reaching out to traders personally with some questions that I thought might yield interesting responses. The responses were overwhelmingly elaborate, and they gave me much more detail than I was anticipating. So I thought, well, what I could do is I could actually start putting these out as full interviews rather than just kind of taking a couple of phrases from them. And what really struck me from week after week of conducting these interviews was the real disconnect between the best practice and the good advice that these successful traders give you, manage your risk, do your research, journal all of your trades, analyze your performance, all of this sort of stuff. That was coming through, but the reality of how I knew people were behaving was very different. And so it gave me the idea for the Coinfessions account, and, confessions accounts are nothing new. I haven't invented sort of a new medium or anything like that, but I saw a space where maybe we saw the other side of that coin. So rather than here's how the best of the best do it, it's here's how, people are actively sort of out there doing it. And so, yeah, I set it up. I did a really good thread actually on how I designed the branding. So it's nice to hear that you say it's very recognizable and stands out, because I put a lot of thought into, the coloring and, just the overall design and layout of it, and had to get the ball rolling a little bit. So I had to seed some of the confessions with some of my own, just so that kind of people understood, okay, that's what this channel is about. This channel's for sharing X, Y, and Z. So I won't tell you which, but you can go back to some of the early ones and maybe have a guess. And yeah, it really just took off. And what has been really heartwarming are people who come and DM me on the Alpha account, just saying how much they enjoy it, but also how much better it makes them feel. I get a lot of confessions of people talking about loneliness and isolation, not only in the physical world of being in your room trying to flip shit coins or NFTs, but in the online realm where everywhere you look, people are sharing success stories, they're sharing P&Ls, they're sharing successful flips of, 10K collections or whatever it might be. There hasn't really been up until now a space for people to say, actually, it's going really bad for me. And I think what's important, or kind of what I find interesting, is for every story of someone, I don't know, minting a Mechaverse. I don't know if you know what that is. It was an NFT collection launched last year that kind of exploded in popularity and then basically fell off a cliff. So you've got stories of people minting a rare one and selling it for like 500 ETH or something like that. And now that same thing is worth 5 ETH. And there's a great success story of someone there. There's also the other side of the coin, which is someone buys an asset for 500 and basically loses all their money. If it's not PvP, it's definitely zero sum, in as much as the risk gets handed on to the next counterparty, and eventually the music stops. In terms of timing, I mean, you mentioned the bear market. I think it was just happenstance that it seemed to be perfect for Coinfessions. I launched it in April of last year. And if you think psychologically about sort of where people are in that space, the veneer of, wag me, we are all going to make it to the moon, all that sort of stuff is beginning to wear off. Obviously now we're sort of deep in the bear market, or maybe have been, who knows if we've actually hit the proper bottom. But I think people were just at that point starting to be seriously underwater on their investments, whether those were in NFTs or coins, but maybe hadn't given up hope, shall we say, of a reversal. We were still, I don't know, 30% off the high. We weren't obviously to know the pain that was to come, and the kind of the systemic collapses that followed with 3AC, Celsius, FTX, you name it. We get a black swan every week in crypto. And I think it was perfect because I think people were still riding high off the success of the bull run right the way through 2021, which is weird saying now it's already 2023. Like I'm saying 2021 and I feel like it was last year, but it's not. It's 2 years ago. People were still riding high and, celebrating this kind of wag me mentality. But actually the cold realization that we're now drifting further and further away from that sort of euphoria was the perfect kind of melting pot for Coinfessions. And I think that's why it picked up so much steam so quickly. And there's something you touched on briefly is, and one of the reasons I enjoy running it so much is that they tend to be more polarizing or extreme versions of behaviors that many of us can relate to. So whether that is over risking on a trade because you think it's a sure thing, or doubting yourself and, I don't know, selling something too early because you were impatient, or there's a classic one from many months ago of some guy that said, I didn't want to take a $50 loss, and I ended up taking a $15,000 loss because obviously he entered a position, it moved against him, and he just thought, I'll just get back to break even and then I'll close it. And obviously he never got that opportunity for whatever reason. And while I would never allow that to happen, it's kind of beyond my risk parameters, I can absolutely relate to, and I think a lot of people can, that desire of, oh no, this is going really badly. If I can just sort of get back my principal, if I can just get out break even, then I'll be happy. And then obviously things just kind of move against you. So I definitely think there is a relatable element to Coinfessions, but it tends to be on steroids. You know, the people that write into Coinfessions are the people that have either had outstanding or outsized success or taken outsized losses and damage. So, you know, you tend to sort of see either end of the spectrum. I do get a couple of people that are like, oh, I've done quite well. I've made, you know, $500 or something. And while that's great, I tend not to publish them simply because in terms of entertainment value, yeah, people kind of be like, well, so what? So yeah, I try to keep the content mix as engaging as I can without making it just sort of loss and doom porn. But I think that's the reality of the market that we've seen over the last, say, 12 months, is that the positive stories are few and far between. And the ones that I do get, I have to really think about whether or not it's, should we say, just boasting, or whether there's a real sort of confession in there. And it's a hard one to judge, but I tend to think of it, is this something that someone would have a problem of sharing from their main account or from, you know, telling their friends and family? If it is, then I'm cool with that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, I've done a bad thing. It could just be, I've made 100 grand or whatever, and I don't know what to do. I haven't told anybody because I'm worried, you know, that they're going to ask me for money, or, you know, whatever it might be. So yeah, there's a lot of curating that happens and a lot of editing, as you might expect. I get a lot of non-English native speakers within the submissions, so I just try and tidy them up a little bit, kind of make them just a bit more legible, a bit more easy to understand. I try not mess with the content too much. Where possible, I remove names of specific influencers that are maybe being called out or whatever, simply because I don't have the time, effort, or inclination to try and verify any of them. And it's not fair to kind of unwarranted just start posting stuff saying this influencer shilled this coin, or, you know, made me buy this or whatever. That, you know, I'm not going to start throwing mud, because then it just becomes a nightmare. So I try and keep it clean in as much as it can be. And it's an odd word to use, but I try and run it with integrity, which is an odd word to choose when some of the stories about people, I don't know, robbing elderly people or stealing inheritance from their grandparents and, you know, other, should we say, nefarious deeds that I was certainly wouldn't undertake myself.
And betting it all in crypto and losing it all, or is that
exactly.
something that happened? Okay, crazy.
Yeah.
Let me jump in here quickly to go and paddle back a little bit to the beginning that you quickly mentioned, just to shine a light on that other project that is called Illustrate Alpha, that seems to be your first project. And when I've seen it, it really reminded me of Jack Butcher's work, Visualize Value. Yeah. Was that inspired by him?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Okay. And there have been two phases of the Illustrate Alpha journey, but take it right back to the start. My day job has been, and still is to some extent, a marketing consultant. helping businesses, brands develop their online presence and all that sort of stuff. And I came across Jack's work in doing that in an effort to help me crystallize and communicate the strategies that I developed more clearly. While I was doing it, I thought, oh, I'd really love to kind of practice this or try my hand at interpreting his approach, but obviously onto something else. Although he is heavily into Web3 and NFTs, like his current checks collection is doing incredibly well. He's a super, super talented guy. At the time, though, all the material that I was learning from, it was generally sort of marketing related. So I didn't want it to be marketing and business related. And so my other passion and interest was crypto and trading specifically. So I thought, well, why don't I just try essentially take the Jack Butcher blueprint and see if I can adapt it to sort of trading knowledge and wisdom. And I started an account that was unoriginally, I should say, called Visualize Alpha, right? So visualize value. I was like, okay, I'll just essentially steal the name and I'll just change value for alpha. And it was basically out of pure laziness. And secondarily, because I didn't really think anything was going to come of it, if that makes sense. It was just a throwaway.
More practicing.
Yeah, it was like a throwaway thing that I thought some people may get a kick out of, but I didn't think it kind of maybe had legs on its own. But then I think it was literally like 10 days after starting it, TradingView, which I don't know if you're familiar with, the charting software that a lot of the people use, I'd say it's the dominant
for technical analysis,
solution. Exactly,
charting, triangles and bars,
just lines and squiggles and candles and all that stuff. They just happened to do a rebrand, so they changed their logo, which was universally despised, shall we say, or rejected by the trading community. And so it kicked up a bit of a stink, as these things always do. Every time anything changes their UI or their logo, everyone sort of complains.
The new one was not liked, or the old one?
This one
the
was
new
not
one,
liked.
I guess.
Yeah, so it's kind of like two lines and a dot. But the old one was a nice cloud, and it had a sort of a chart line moving through it. And it was just very familiar. I think it had been there for years and years and years. So anyway, they've done this. They did this rebrand, and everybody said they hated it. So they took to Twitter and said, "If you can do better, show us." And I thought, well, why not? And I made a submission, and it got seen by, I guess, a couple of big CT traders, and they shared it and was like, "This is the one. Use this, etc." I think it ended up with, I don't know, 5,000 likes and like 2,000 comments and stuff. So it kind of properly went off for an account that was only 10 days old. And so that got me to like, I don't know, 1,500 followers within 10 days, within 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up winning the logo competition. They didn't end up using it. They bought the rights off me and gave me some other sort of prizes, which is really great. And they've helped me launch the newsletter and all that sort of stuff. So, but what it really did is it just kind of got my foot through the door.
How much did they pay for a logo they didn't use afterwards?
I can't tell you that.
Yeah, but more or less, like was it like $1,000 and was it just 100?
It was 5 figures.
Oh wow! Okay. Just to and how does this work? Because you put it out there, they could have stolen it as well, right? They could have just taken it.
I mean, I don't know what the rules specifically regarding intellectual property and kind of public forum are, but they obviously, they didn't know that they weren't going to use it at the time. You can even find it on my Twitter feed. Essentially, I think there was a logo that I was unaware of that looked quite similar. It used I used a breakout pattern, which is basically a diagonal line going up and then sort of breaking through a line as part of the design. And there is another logo that uses that. And while I personally don't see the relationship kind of between the two logos, I can totally understand from a sort of a legal and compliance standpoint that a large international business might just want to completely avoid that headache and just kind of, plus they probably paid like 6 figures to some expensive design agencies to design their current one. So, they probably didn't want to backtrack too hard on it. But the prize money was good, and I've got a lifetime license to the product, so I've got 40 years to make it. Basically, then my trading view expires, and I'll have to start paying to try and keep making it. So, but that was really kind of them, and I'm still in touch with several members of the team. And they help me out every now and again with giveaways for my newsletter and other stuff like that. So they're a good team building a really good product that most crypto users use every day. So it's just sort of great to be associated with them.
Yeah. And when you think about it, also for them, I mean, there might not be so many design savvy people or designers out there who have such a deep understanding of their product and the community that they're serving, etc. I mean, you are kind of a unique combination, right? Not all creative people are also kind of into trading or into crypto. How do you reconcile those two different worlds?
Well, I mean, I've been involved in crypto since I think it was like 2013. I bought my first Bitcoin, and a friend of mine just messaged me and said, "Have you heard of Bitcoin? I'm going to get some." So I was like, "Okay, fine." I think it was £300 or something at the time. And I can just remember I bought it on local Bitcoins, where essentially it's just a P2P transaction. So I'm just sending money to some random guy and hoping he's sending me Bitcoin back. And I remember my wife came home from work, because I worked from home at the time anyway. And she said, "Oh, what have you done today?" And I said, "Well, I bought a Bitcoin." And she was like, "What's that?" And I said, I'm not really sure." And she said, "Well, how much was it?" And I said, 300 quid. She's like, "What? You've just
Are you
spent
crazy?
300 quid on some like that stupid thing." But she's definitely glad I did now.
Yeah, I think there was kind of like you go a place, you meet up, and then some people use it also in cash, right? Like you go there, you hand over the cash, and then you receive the
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
I never did it. I never did a face-to-face transaction. I don't have the genetics for a street fight. I'd rather lose 300 quid digitally than 300 quid and my health on the street. So I just chose digital option. And to be fair, I never had a bad experience from it. I think a lot of the people in the space back then were, obviously they were speculating and they were trying to make money, but it wasn't the kind of stake that we have at play now. Like I would
Yeah.
never dream of buying a whole Bitcoin, I don't know, call it 21K, I think it is at the moment, and just wiring that to someone through local Bitcoins. And I don't know if local Bitcoins is still operational. I'm sure it is.
I
But,
think it is.
just for a couple of £100,
Yeah.
that it's worth the risk.
Yeah. It was more like hobbyists and idealists, and they wanted to spread the word of Bitcoin and probably were excited about meeting up and, like showing this cool thing. But you also worked at home, so you were ahead of the curve. I mean, you worked at home 2013, where probably nobody is working at home yet. And you've also bought Bitcoin 2013. I mean, you seem to have kind of a knack to be ahead of the curve.
I've been working from home since 2011, purely because before that I had an office job. I graduated from university, went to an office job at a large London-based international marketing firm, and I won't say I hated it, but I knew it wasn't for me in the long run. I stayed there 2 years, and what I didn't like about it was the importance on attendance. It was basically kind of attendance-based performance. So you have to be at work to do your work, which is something I inherently disagreed with. And I do think, because this is a big debate right now, you look at, what's going on with Twitter in terms of everybody being sort of forced to work from the office. I definitely think if you're trying to change the world, like having diligent, hardworking people, everybody together is probably the way to do it if you're Tesla or SpaceX or what have you. But for, I'd say, most businesses, I think it's probably pushed a little bit too far. So anyway, at the time, I didn't appreciate essentially the idea that, because I was a junior as well, when you're a senior manager, you get more perks and you can just say, oh, I'll be working from home on Thursday or whatever. When you're a junior, you've got to really go in there. And I remember one day in particular, it was a super duper snowy day in London. The underground was shut, the buses were shut, the weather was terrible. And I walked like 12 miles or something like that from my house into the office in the snow, thinking, oh God, this is really important. And basically I got there and nobody else had bothered. And I just thought, like, why? Everyone was just like, I'm staying at home. And I'm like, why? A, why am I like this? But B, it just goes to show that when needed, it's fine. People can work from home. And so the arbitrary nature of any large organization that is controlled by, HR and systems and processes and performance reviews and all of that stuff, I just knew that that was never for me. And so I always knew that I wanted to be self-employed, which came a few years later. But a middle ground for me was essentially more autonomy, a greater control over how I spend my time. And, I won't lie, there is an element of if I feel like I can do my job in 5 hours a day, then I get a little bit of time back, so to speak, which isn't the most ambitious and sort of driven of career choices. I'm sure I could have achieved more had I really kind of exerted myself, but that's not my character. I've never been ambitious in terms of I want to manage a big team and like get a big office and all that sort of stuff. None of that really interests me. I essentially just want to be left alone. That's my idea of making it, is just have enough and be left alone.
I can definitely agree on that one. I think a lot of people are actually driven by freedom nowadays more than these other shiny objects. But it also has a downside. I mean, it can get lonely, right? I mean,
for sure,
if you're working by yourself, and it's hard to prioritize because you have probably many ideas. No, I have, and you probably have too. I mean, you just mentioned 3 projects now. And probably have always ideas for other ones and opportunities, and it's hard to focus, right? And kind of like push forward as well, because it's grinding as well to push something out.
It is, but I find what helps is the variety. So what I find interesting, just observing my own behavior, is I worked Illustrate Alpha until, not I was bored of it, but until I kind of ran out of steam a little bit. And I just slowed up on that and then transitioned and introduced the newsletter, where it was less design heavy. It was more copywriting and interviewing and meeting people like we're meeting today. And then ran that for 3-4 months. And again, not that I got bored of it, but it scratched an itch that I had, or like an idea that had been bubbling. And then I was like, okay, well, Coinfessions. So my interest in each of my projects diminishes or increases at any given time. And what's really nice is I can just pick one up and just put real energy into it.
And just out of curiosity, and probably a lot of people are interested in that as well, like, do you find a way to monetize all this interest? Because I think the Coinfessions, my guess would be Coinfessions so far none. Then I would say the Get Alpha Mail, you mentioned you have sponsors, so that's a way of doing it. And Alpha Illustrated is kind of feeding the email. How do you think about these projects? Because at the end of the day, most people also have to somehow pay the bills, etc.
Yeah, it's super tricky. I think for each of the projects, it's slightly different. So the illustration stuff, the Alpha Illustrated, I'd guess I try and think about what's the proposition for a sponsor. Why would they want to be associated with it? It's a hard nut to crack for Alpha Illustrated because the content is trading related, but I'm not portraying myself. I'm not positioning myself as a trader. So you look at the kind of sponsorships that you tend to get in crypto, you get people, like exchanges, you get crypto projects, you get NFT collections or whoever it might be, and they go and sponsor traders, and traders say, oh, I trade on this exchange, you can get 10% off with my link or whatever it might be. Now, I have been approached a couple of times about stuff like that, but that's not really why people follow me. So it would feel somewhat disingenuous if I did that. And to be fair, I did that for a brief period of time on the newsletter. And actually, on Coinfessions, which was only, I think, live for a month or two, but it didn't sit well with me. And maybe I'll come on to that in a minute. But the newsletter is Alpha Illustrated first, I guess. I got quite lucky again with the timing of when I set that up, because I managed to hit the NFT sort of craze like full on. And when I say full on, obviously I'm not talking, the likes of Bored Apes or, anything like that. It's a completely different proposition. But I think, I don't know what the volume done on a couple of my illustrations is, but I think it's like maybe 13, 15 ETH or something like that, which at the time, it's sort of mid bull run when ETH was trading at 4, 5K. That's a significant amount of money that can keep me going and sort of propel me forward. Also worth noting, just before I guess I move on to the others, that I still do my marketing consultancy stuff. I'm not full-time crypto. I'm not kind of fully committed. Alpha Illustrated also, I get a lot of commission work. So I get approached by a lot of traders looking to, I don't know, they might be creating educational content that they want some sort of design help with. Sometimes they're looking for just a complete rebrand, because the trading space is becoming quite, influencer led. A lot of people are looking to kind of be a marketable personality rather than maybe your old school trader that doesn't really care and just kind of focuses on the charts. There's definitely now this, Twitch streaming trader, there's your TikTok trader, and, all of this sort of stuff. So brand and position is much more important to them. And like you say, I maybe wouldn't say I'm unique, but I definitely have a niche where I fit kind of around that sort of crypto design space, which is nice.
Can I quickly go on a side quest about the people that you are personally interested in, and kind of like in the circle that you are in, the traders, right? Can you like give us a quick overview for people who are not so familiar with what that means, how traders now they are presenting themselves online? There's TikTok, there's Twitter, there's so much going on. Do you think about it in an organized way, like top tier traders or people that I follow and respect, and then there's kind of stuff that is kind of a little bit tricky, or just to have a feeling of the landscape?
Not much of my thinking is organized, but I think there's a couple of strands to it, right? So yes, I definitely think I sort of hear traders in my mind, and I'm sure a lot of people do. There's people who I think, okay, this person's legit, whether they're trading with size, like millions and millions of dollars, or whether they're trading with, $10,000. That almost doesn't matter to me. The thing that matters to me is purely that they walk the walk as well as talk the talk. And I think you only need to look through the list of people that I've interviewed. And I think I mentioned the word integrity before. Maybe it's a bit pious of me, but there are a lot of people that act with integrity, and there are a lot of people that don't. So you kind of end up crossing this line of influencer trader. And, there are some very well-known examples, people like BitBoy, Crypto, Moon Carl. You might be familiar with these guys. They've got millions and millions and millions of followers, and they're doing really, really well for themselves. But I wouldn't ever think of calling them traders, because they're marketers, and they're very successful marketers. There's a formula that works. It gets clicks, it gets engagement, it gets whatever. That's fine, but they're not the people who I'm interested in talking to. The people I want to talk to are the people that maybe slightly mentally like deranged, because they spend hours like looking through like really fine detail of how the markets move, trying to understand, okay, well, why is this happening? People who, in many cases are first principle thinkers. So some of the guys I've interviewed, and when I've talked about how they got started in trading, they literally just kind of went in there and was like, okay, well, what does this person do? What does this person do? What's this person's incentive? And I think incentives come into play, obviously, in crypto a lot. We should always focus on who the actor is and what their incentives are, but it plays out on social as well. So with someone who shills a ref link, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because I think it's a legitimate way of obviously generating revenue, but ref links also save the end user revenue or kind of funds as well. If that's their primary source of income, then their incentive isn't to be a great trader. Their incentive is to get as large an audience as possible, and those aren't the same thing. And so the traders I like to spend time with and like to talk to are the people that make me feel stupid. Basically, there's that classic thing of if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. If I could summarize my Twitter experience in anything, I've just surrounded myself with people who I have no idea what they're saying. Well, maybe that's a bit extreme. Not that I have no idea what they're saying, but they're operating on a level above me, specifically when it comes to trading. Because I love that. You learn stuff all the time, even if, every now and again they say something or they share something, and I'm like, I have no idea what to take away from this. And those are the people I like talking to, because their incentives are not about growing an audience. Although many of them end up growing a big audience because they're very successful, their incentives are generally either to become a better trader or blow off steam. A lot of trading is waiting. You're waiting for the right setup, or you're in a position, you're just waiting for it to resolve. That's when a lot of kind of people come into CT and they kind of just kill some time. They play video games, they talk shit, they share Pepes, stuff like that. And those are the people I like to surround myself with.
I'm not a trader myself. I don't even spend time in trading view. When I look at charts, I do literally longest time frame usually.
The lowest time frame.
No, the highest,
the highest.
Zoom out all the way to see, okay, now could be a good moment to get in. Not saying that's a good thing, but I still follow traders online. Do you also get, through your connections, you connect with these people, you have conversations with them for your email? I believe a lot of that stuff is happening in private groups, etc., where the traders are speaking more freely, because once you do this on Twitter, you get a lot of flack. The stakes are higher. If you say something that doesn't turn out that way, and you have a lot of followers, pushback, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing a little bit behind the scenes as well?
I mean, obviously I'm not in every paid group or kind of secret Telegram chat, but I've done a lot of work with a lot of successful traders, many of whom do have their own communities for educational purposes. So I'm in a couple of communities that are paid and therefore are kind of membership based, but not as a paying member. I got kind of brought in, I guess, as on a friend pass. And so, I can say that depending on the community, there is a lot of really, really good information out there. People obviously talk a lot more candidly, and you get a lot more from your mentor or the team. Just from my personal experience, it's not something I've benefited from purely because I'm kind of too busy. I wouldn't say I've given up on my dream of becoming a trader, but my focus is elsewhere. I still trade, but I'm no longer working on making it specifically through trading. I'm more focused on the build side of things. And I'm just happy to be operating in this space that I love. So a lot of people hate on, paid groups and call them scams and stuff. Again, to me, it just comes down to poor judge of character. There are lots of paid groups out there that I would never ever join because I don't respect the people that run it. That's what it comes down to, is you need to be confident and sure that the person offering you the service is the real deal. When I first started trading, I paid for content from a guy called Tom Dante. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but
No.
he was he's given me a lot of the foundation knowledge and techniques that I use for when I trade. And I paid maybe £200 one-off charge to kind of access the lessons. So I would absolutely recommend to someone, if they're thinking of dabbling in trading, that paid content can be worth it. There's obviously a lot of good free stuff out there too, but the messages that travel furthest and are loudest aren't necessarily the best, if that makes sense. I think MM Crypto shared something about a bull flag that wasn't a bull flag last week. which is a technical pattern. And it almost doesn't matter to his audience that was incorrect. But to, someone who's spent time honing the craft of trading, that kind of stuff matters. And it's bewildering almost how someone like that has had the kind of success they've had. But then you're viewing essentially a marketer through a trader's lens. And I don't mean to sort of knock on anyone in particular. There's a lot of free content out there. It's just harder to work out what good stuff is. So that's why I think paid content's got a space.
Yeah. Who would be somebody, and, by the off chance that this person would hear it here, could give you like a great setup to invite them for your newsletter, who would be like the dream guest for you to have on that you would like to interview?
I'm not going to answer that if that's well,
okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer it because
it's Kobe. Is it Kobe?
It's not Kobe, although I would love to talk to Kobe. I think I've never met anybody who is basically as undefeatable as Kobe. Like, if you ever see Kobe in an argument online, just wish well, for the other person, because it never goes well for them. He's a very, very smart guy, and I think what's so likable about him is in a space where so many people take themselves so seriously. Kobe kind of plays the fool, but in quite a Shakespearean way, which in Shakespeare, the fool is always the person that tells the truth and essentially tells hard truths. He's always the smartest person in the room. So if you look at things like King Lear, everybody is too afraid to tell the king kind of what's really going on and stuff like that. Whereas the fool can basically tell him, like, drop a truth bomb, but it's like, haha, because I'm the fool, and nobody listens to me because I'm just being silly. But actually, the audience and the reader know that this is the truth. And so I think there's definitely something to Kobe's sort of self-deprecating humor and analysis that certainly belies the fact that he's obviously very, very smart. But no, it wasn't Kobe, although he was definitely on the list. It's somebody else that I won't mention now because he actually recently approached me. Oh, GCR sold his account. You know that.
And yeah, I'm not sure if that stuff is true.
No, I'm memeing. I'm memeing. No, the person. Okay. No, the person. Yeah, the person in question has recently approached me about doing something. I'm not sure if it will work out, but in case it does, I wouldn't want to mention it here. But yeah, it's very exciting.
That's amazing. So you stand out so much that actually your dream guest comes to you.
Well, I mean, that's not strictly true. I have approached him many times, but I never got a response. And then randomly on Christmas Day last year, I got just a random DM from them saying, "Yeah, I'm up for this." And then
that's amazing. Kind of the best present.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I know you mentioned it before we recorded the podcast. To get in touch with people, I mean, that consumes so much time, and it really is worth to put the effort in it, because I guess as you said, you get approached a lot. They don't put the work in, and then you have no chance. So you can really stand out with something a little bit more crafted and also following up, etc. So I totally understand that came to be, and you've now been the proof that this can yield great results.
Well, hopefully, I like to try and give it, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 goes. You don't ever want to like hassle somebody, and you just have to think, if they were interested, they would have replied by now. But especially if you're trying to reach someone who's got a large audience or a following, you have to be appreciative of the fact they probably get, I don't know, 100 DMs a day or whatever it might be.
Since we already talk about, like growing on Twitter, etc., and I have here a brand specialist who worked at internationally renowned marketing agencies and who's very successful on Twitter himself. I wonder, if you look at my stuff, what can I do better? I suck at Twitter. I have like 200 followers. And I spend a lot of time reading on there, not so much producing. But do you see something that you say, hey, look, change that, do this? Or like, like something that you learned that is so natural for you that you just a general tip, maybe for other people who would like to grow on the social media or grow whatever project they have in mind. Share some alpha with us.
Well, I mean, it has kind of become a science, on its own. And a friend of mine, a guy called Satsdart, Satsdart, a trader on Twitter, he
Is
actually
he
had
the
a
German
recent.
guy? Sorry
Yeah,
to
yeah, he's
interrupt. Is
German.
he the German?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. He recently shared a post talking about exactly this in terms of how you can grow your presence. And while I won't sort of cover his points, it's a good thread. You should check it out. Generally, it comes down to being yourself and being sort of relentlessly positive. Like, he is a machine. You mention him in a tweet and you get a like relentlessly. He likes every comment on every one of his posts, and he posts a lot. And while I'm not saying that that's necessarily the approach you should take, I think, again, it comes down to incentives. We spoke about incentives earlier. Not only why are you on social? So in your case, it's to grow the DeFi brand and make people aware of the content that you're creating because you feel that it adds value. But also, why are your audience on there? And I think, generally speaking, all of us are on social media because we're junkies, right? We want the dopamine hit of getting a notification on your phone or logging into, the browser and seeing the little bell and it's got like 10 next to it or 20 plus, which is what it's always on Coinfessions. And I think that what Sats was kind of alluding to in that is essentially, if we're all druggies, let's just get each other high. Like, let's kind of share the love, because people notice that you're acknowledging them, even with something as meaningless as a like. There's a human being on the other end, and actually your behavior can influence that. So, I mean, that's obviously one thing. But if you asked me to start again and remove kind of Alpha Illustrated and start again, could I grow it to 20K plus? Could I grow Coinfessions to 150K plus? I'm not sure I could. Like in life generally, sorry, this is maybe going to seem a bit preachy, but just in life generally, I feel like people massively underplay the role that chance has in everything, whether it's a traffic accident because you got held up by a previous car pulling in front of you, or, whatever it might be, who you sat next to in school on that first day determines your best friend for life. All of these sort of minor incidences in your life. So when it comes to just growing an account, if I started Alpha Illustrated again, there wouldn't be a TradingView logo competition to kind of get me that start. There wouldn't be the kind of NFT rush that allowed me to keep working on it and growing it. There's so many circumstances and variables that go into the success. And if you look at something like Coinfessions, which, to be fair, I didn't have any real expectations for it, but it turns out what people really wanted was an ability to share, their wins and their losses, but in a way that A, other people would see them, and B, kind of, I guess, preserves their anonymity. But then come the comments. So someone saying, "Oh, don't worry, dude. I did this too," or that it makes me feel so much better knowing that other people did this. Obviously, some people are just like in there stirring up shit, saying, "Oh, you should just bet more," or whatever it is. But I think that's what it brings. It kind of gives everybody access to that audience, if that makes sense, right? That, there's 150,000 odd followers to that account that anybody with a story that they want to share can reach. And I think that's really nice about it, if that makes sense.
No, makes total sense. And I think we glanced a little bit over this, but if I may have a follow-up question to the very, very beginning when you launched it, you said you wrote some of your own confessions, etc., but you still have an account that has 0 followers. So were there like some tactical things that you did in the beginning to get it like the first 100 or first 1,000 followers? Because it needs some steam, right? To
Yeah,
reach
yeah.
out to the world.
I mean, it was a little bit easier because I had the Alpha Illustrated account, right? So when I set up Coinfessions, I tweeted out from Alpha saying, hey guys, I've just started this new project. Go check it out. Feel free to kind of leave a submission. Alpha was smaller at the time. I think it was maybe 10 or 12,000. And to be fair, it took a little while to get going. In my mind, it did. I was looking at the analytics for something the other day, and I think it got 6,500 followers in its first month. So it can't have taken that long. But I remember basically thinking, okay, maybe I've misjudged this. Maybe there isn't much interest in this content. But then it just took off, and there was maybe a greater variety in the earlier confessions. Maybe it's just me being nostalgic or what have you, but a lot of the confessions these days, they revolve around the same narratives that have kind of formed the backdrop of the market over the last 4 months. So we hear a lot of people talking about Luna, a lot of talk about Celsius, FTX, the obvious things. Whereas obviously none of that had happened at the start. So people still were a bit more chipper. And a lot of the stories that were coming through felt a bit more personal. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, people just related to them. And to be fair, I have no idea how it started growing so quickly. I mean, I got a couple of very high profile followers or certainly people that came along and commented, like Kobe and GCR. Actually, you've mentioned, a couple of them already, and SBS. All of them have kind of been to the page and commented on various stories. And GCR, to his credit, someone had a medical condition things were bleak for them. And he just left a comment saying, if you can prove this is you, I'll basically support your surgery costs or whatever it might be. So I don't know if that ever got resolved, but it did lead me to introduce a secret ID. So when you do submit a confession, it just allows you to leave a code that no one apart from me will see. So that if in the future you ever need to prove you wrote a confession, you can say it was definitely me because the secret code is 123 or what have you.
That's what that is about. Yeah, I was wondering about that when I've seen it.
And sometimes people follow up with things. There was one guy who I think was about to buy a house with his girlfriend, and he just blew all his money on some shit coin. And it was a very popular post, and everyone was worried about him. And he followed it up, a couple of weeks later, just saying, just to let you know, I worked it out with my girlfriend, and I've borrowed money or whatever it is, and we've got the house anyway. But he was able to do that, provably as him, because he followed it up with the same code. Otherwise, someone could just follow up on any confession and say, oh, by the way, I won the lottery or whatever, and it'll be a bit of nonsense, really.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into reading out some of your favorite confessions. Maybe until you pull it up, I can read one here, which is the most successful one, let's say, in pure metrics. Okay. I had 6 figures on FTX, my family's net worth. Hadn't lost one trade this year after moving to risk off and taking 1 to 2 trades each month. More than doubling my normie income. Told my wife about the FTX FUD this weekend and she panicked on my behalf. She woke up in the middle of the night, Sunday, and transferred our funds from FTX to our ledger, which I'd only shown her how to do in case I die. Apart from that, she has no interest in crypto. Safe to say, I avoided divorce that night. Crazy.
Yep.
That's a crazy one. That's one of the few positive tweets I've seen with FTX involved.
Yeah, I mean, it helps put a little bit of perspective on it, because when you see, 10 billion lost or stolen, not even so much lost, it's very difficult to kind of imagine the actual impact that necessarily has on individuals, if that makes sense. So a lot of the tweets around FTX, you really start to understand the real ramifications and kind of the reality that a lot of people were having to live through. I took a very significant, for me, amount of money off FTX. I think it was 24 hours, maybe less, before withdrawals were frozen and everything fell apart. So I kind of got away very lightly or very luckily. And I don't know how I would feel if I'd lost that money. It would have been, absolutely.
Definitely. I was just the other day tweeting about that because I quit my job and at the Pico top, so to say, and then was doing crypto myself. And I think kind of these moments where I was not stuck in an office helped me to get it off, because I was literally working in a cafe and I've seen the FUD happening on Twitter, and I literally just like packed, went home, and it took hours until it was out. 24 hours later, it would have been all closed down. So that was the one benefit I had from quitting my job.
Yeah, I mean, fortune favors the brave, as they say. So
another one which I like is here. When Gary Vee launched his NFT book project, you got one NFT for every 9 books purchased. I photoshopped many receipts and received 100 plus NFTs, which I've sold for around $80,000 total from zero invested.
yeah, exactly. So never underestimate the resourcefulness of a crypto trader.
Yeah. I mean, that's fraud, but it's very clever. I can read one more. I have one more here.
Yeah, go for it.
Wife and I live a simple life on 20k USD a year. Made mid 7 figures with our savings this cycle. Been sitting in our account for 1+ year and she still hasn't checked. I guess one day she will look and our lives will change forever. Until then, doing what we love and carrying on as usual. That's a wholesome one as well.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. And those are some of my favorite ones where you can feel like there's a real human story. And so I think maybe my favorite all time confession, I think I received, it was like the second day that Coinfessions was running. I received it on the 4th of April. And it goes, I sold all my crypto during the May 2021 crash, not because of panic, but paying for my son's chemotherapy. Is the best decision I've ever made, even though he's gone now.
Wow.
And like that just really, I don't know, it just really hit me. And I was like, wow. And I feel like part of the reason I love that so much is certainly in the crypto space, it's very easy to lose track of, the utility of the money in the real world. You kind of get this numbness to the kind of figures that you're handling or that you see kind of being thrown around, and that it's important to remember there are more important things in life than crypto. And I think that was a really early demonstration that everything has its order in that kind of priority, and family and health are really important.
Definitely. Back in the days, it was more on Reddit, and there was also some, people kind of celebrating their wins, and a couple of times like stuff like this came up and everybody's just in the mindset back in the days there, everybody's hodl, like whenever you sold and you said you sold, like everybody was piling in the comments on and said, why did you sell? You shouldn't sell. But from time to time, people came with these couple of wins, and then everybody was celebrating that as well, because at the end of the day, you play this game to reach a goal, right? And the goal, it has to do something with your life, not just to accumulate more digital coins. That
I couldn't agree more. And actually that leads me on to the next one that I've selected, which is also from April, so again a very early one. This is from somebody who has made a lot of money and essentially has been left feeling very unfulfilled and unhappy. From March 2020 to now, I went from around 200k to making 70 million. Confusingly, I feel totally lost on the purpose of life. I expected life to be perfect, but it's not. I'm more impatient, have a shorter temper, and feel like a waste of life for having money but not adding any real value to the world. Basically, just won the lottery, and now I'm sitting around. It's isolating and depressing. And that was the first confession of that type that I received, and have received several more, and sometimes they get called boastful or whatever, but I'm not sure it is. I think the reality is that people expect wealth, or kind of extreme wealth, to be some sort of magic bullet that's going to make them happier people, and it's not the case. And I was doing some research after actually receiving this one, and there is actually a syndrome. It's called sudden wealth syndrome, where you very, very quickly or overnight kind of come into loads and loads of money, and how that has a really negative effect on your mental health, because a lot of the frameworks in your life essentially cease to exist anymore. So whether that's, a 9-to-5 job and, X number of holidays, days off a year, a lot of those restrictions and stuff are taken away from you. And I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of paradox of choice, where essentially the more choice you have, the unhappier you are, because you end up with analysis paralysis. You're thinking, well, I could do that, and I could do that, and I could do that. And whatever you end up doing, it's easy to believe that you could have picked something better. It's why if you go to a restaurant and there's only, 4 things on the menu, it's very easy for you to be like, that's the one for me. And when it comes, you think, great, yeah, what a good choice I made. If you go to a restaurant with 100 things on the menu, no matter how good your food is, you might see someone else, another dish that you'd been considering kind of being taken to another table, and you think, that actually looks a little bit better than what I've got. And it's just the opportunity cost of having that choice. There's a really interesting TED talk about this by a psychologist called Barry Schwartz, called The Paradox of Choice. And essentially the premise, or the globally accepted truth, is that the more choice you have, the more freedom you have, and the more freedom you have, the happier you are. And he posits that that's simply not true. It's true up to a certain point, but like a goldfish in a bowl, kind of they're happier within a sort of a defined ecosystem. And I think what I liked about this confession was it goes to show that the goal that you're striving for isn't going to change who you are, isn't going to make you suddenly happy. You'll just be rich and unhappy instead of poor, or, not rich and unhappy. And I just think that's really important. I think it's something that maybe gets lost in the kind of wag me mindset, which is, oh yeah, we're all going to get rich together and it's going to be brilliant. Except generally speaking, the odds would suggest that we're not going to really get rich. And those that don't do it together. I mean, apart from, maybe a few select groups and things like that. So yeah, I just think, I don't know if you're familiar with the phrase, the cake is a lie. Are you familiar with that?
No, that one I haven't heard. No.
Okay, so it's from a video game called Portal. It's a fantastic game from Valve, who did Half-Life. And it's like a puzzle game, and you shoot like rings on the wall, and you can travel from one ring to another, and it's kind of, you've got to solve the puzzles to escape. But throughout the game, you're being promised that, oh, keep going, there's cake at the end.
It's like a space game, but the motivation is cake.
It's like, oh, we're planning a big party for you, and then you kind of, as the game develops, it kind of gets darker and darker, and you see kind of people scrawling on the wall in kind of blood or kind of ink, the cake is a lie, the cake is a lie. And it kind of come to commonly mean that, your promised reward doesn't exist, essentially, and that kind of the thing that you're striving for is like a mirage. And no sooner do you get there than you realize it was never there at all. So yeah, I like to think about it in that sense, that the wealth that people seek isn't gonna change who they are.
This was a triumph. I'm making a note here, huge success. It's hard to overstate my satisfaction. Aperture Science.
If you're still listening, chances are that you liked this episode. DeFi is not just me, it's also you, the listener. And each day there are more listeners joining, and together we can spread the word about DeFi by giving it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening. Send this episode to a friend who might be interested. Check out the website, visit defire.money and click on subscribe to get the new episode and in the future also blog posts directly into your inbox. Also make sure to follow me on Twitter @defire_money. All of this helps so we can continue to produce more episodes more frequently and get the most interesting guests that you deserve. Good night and see you soon.